The chandeliers over the Heart Lake Resort ballroom were still glowing when my mother lifted her champagne flute and announced loud enough for every single person in the room to hear that Sierra's wedding had cost $50,000. The applause was immediate, eager, almost desperate, as if everyone wanted a piece of that perfection. The roses were still fresh on the tables, the string quartet was packing up their instruments, and crystal glasses clinked like we were inside a snow globe. Someone shook too hard. I sat near the end of the long banquet table, a place I hadn't chosen but had quietly been steered into, where I could admire Sierra without obstructing anyone else's view. She posed under the lights with her new husband smiling like the cameras were still rolling. She looked flawless, polished hair, perfect makeup, the glittering bride goddess our mother always said she was born to be. Then my mother turned toward me. And now she said, flashing her guests the smile she saved for public performances, "We just need our Julia to find her special someone so we can celebrate again." So her voice sharpened into a blade. "When is your turn, sweetheart?" The table fell silent so quickly I could hear my own breath. Forks hovered mid-air. Someone stifled a pity laugh. A couple of bridesmaids exchanged a look that said they expected me to shrink into my chair like I always used to. Even Sierra paused her posing her diamond, catching the chandelier light as she smirked in my direction. The kind of smirk that waits for you to break. But I didn't break. I set my glass down carefully, the stem clicking lightly against the tablecloth. And I smiled. Just a small one. Barely a curve. But it spread through the room like a chill. They had no idea what that smile meant. I lifted my eyes to my mother, the queen of this glittering little kingdom, and said nothing. Not yet. Because the moment deserved its quiet, and the quiet terrified them. My mother blinked rapidly, unsettled. Marilyn Hart never lost her footing, not even in 6-inch heels. "Julia," she prompted like my silence was an insult. "We're all waiting, dear." Around me, the air thickened with anticipation. Humiliation hung like perfume in the room, familiar, expected. They had done this before. They had done worse. But tonight, I wasn't the same Julia they'd always stepped over. I folded my hands in my lap and finally said, "I guess we'll get to that." Sierra let out a soft, amused scoff. "Mom, she's teasing. You know, Julia, she likes attention in unexpected ways." She lifted her chin toward me, playing the doting sister for her audience. "Don't worry. We'll help you find someone eventually." I kept smiling. A hint of confusion flickered behind Sierra's perfect lashes. She wasn't used to not getting a reaction. Down the table, an aunt whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Poor thing. Maybe she just isn't meant for love." I didn't flinch. Not this time. The words floated around me like dust, the kind you stop noticing after years of breathing it in. My mother clapped her hands lightly, trying to regain control. "Anyway, tonight is about Sierra and Clayton," she said warmly, then added with a pointed glance at me, "and about celebrating real milestones." Real milestones. As opposed to whatever she thought my life was. The string quartet began rolling out their equipment, and waitstaff moved around us collecting plates. The night was supposed to be winding down, but the tension at our end of the table was only rising. I saw Clayton watching me again, subtle, curious, maybe even a little troubled, but he dropped his eyes when Sierra brushed his arm possessively. I'd seen that look from him before. Not desire, not pity, just confusion, like he sensed that the version of Julia he'd been told about didn't line up with reality. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Darling, we're only teasing. We just worry about you. You worry about the family image," I replied gently. "Not me." A visible tremor passed through her smile. "Douglas?" My father finally looked up from his wine, only to sigh, loudly. "Julia, don't start. I wasn't starting anything. I was finishing something." A server approached with a gift bag wrapped in pale pink tissue paper. "Ms. Hart," he said to Sierra, "the item you requested is here." Sierra's face lit up with malicious delight. "Oh, perfect," she chirped. She practically bounced as she walked around the table and set the bag directly in front of me. "A little present to help you get inspired, big sis." I reached into the bag and pulled out a glossy box first, a deluxe membership to Last Hope Love Dating for Women over 30. Underneath was a self-help book with embossed gold letters, Why Some Women Die Alone and How to Avoid Becoming One. My hands didn't shake, but something inside me tightened quietly, sharply. The table tittered. Even Marilyn covered her mouth in delight as if this was the height of sisterly affection. Clayton shot Sierra a sharp look. She pretended not to notice. I closed the box, set it gently aside, and looked at my sister. "Thank you," I said. Sierra froze. "You're welcome." "Very thoughtful," I added softly. Now the confusion spread to my mother. "Julia, don't be dramatic. Sierra is trying to help you." I tilted my head. Is that what she said? For the first time all evening, Sierra's perfect smile wobbled. Mother straightened her posture, defensive. "We're just concerned. You're almost 30 and what?" I asked, still calm. "My life doesn't look the way you wanted it to, Julia," she warned. "That's enough," Douglas muttered. "Let's not ruin tonight with your moods. My moods. Always my moods. Never their cruelty." I glanced around the table, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for everyone but me. I'd been waiting my whole life to stop shrinking for them. Someone at the far end cleared their throat nervously. Another whispered, "What's happening?" I folded my napkin neatly and placed it beside my plate. "You asked me," I said into the quiet when my turn was. The air thickened. "And I told you," I continued, my voice steady, almost gentle. "But you weren't listening." My mother's face paled. Sierra's hand tightened around her wine glass. My father leaned forward as if bracing for a blow. I let out a slow breath, the kind you release after holding it for 8 long months. "My turn," I said softly, "already came." The ballroom went silent. Even the staff stopped moving. Sierra blinked first. "What? What are you talking about?" I met her eyes with that same small smile that started all of this. "I'm not waiting for a wedding," I said. I already had one. A fork clattered against a plate. Someone gasped. My mother's hand clutched the tablecloth. My father's wine glass slipped from his fingers and shattered across the floor. I stayed perfectly still, watching their perfect world tilt, watching their masks crack. And in their stunned faces, I saw the first spark of something that had been dead for years. Fear. Not of me, but of the truth I had finally stopped hiding. 8 months earlier, on a cold spring morning in Seattle, I stood in the bridal suite of a small greenhouse venue, smoothing the front of my ivory dress, while my heart knocked unevenly inside my chest. Evan's reflection appeared behind me in the mirror, smiling that calm, grounding smile of his. Outside, the sound of vendors preparing the ceremony drifted through the cracked window, the soft rustle of flowers, the faint clink of folding chairs being set up beneath rows of string lights. It should have felt perfect. It almost did. Except for 2 empty chairs. They were placed in the front row directly across from where I'd be saying my vows. 2 simple wooden seats draped with wildflowers. Queen Anne's lace daisies and tiny sprigs of rosemary I'd woven myself, while thinking of my mother's voice the day she'd mentioned liking their scent. Beneath the blooms, 2 plaques rested against the chairbacks, hand-painted in soft green. Reserved for Mom, reserved for Dad. I'd stared at those plaques all morning, rearranging them, adjusting the angle, smoothing the ribbons, pretending the knots in my stomach were from excitement and not dread. My parents knew the date. They knew the time. I'd mailed the invitations myself. FedEx overnight, triple confirmed the address, checked the delivery tracking until the screen blurred. I had done everything right. But as the minutes slid by, the chairs stayed empty. Evan stepped closer. "Do you want me to call them?" he asked, his voice warm, steady. I shook my head. "No. They They'll be here. They wouldn't miss this. Even saying the words felt like pulling old stitches that never healed correctly. He didn't argue. He never pushed. He only reached forward and gently squeezed my shoulder until my breathing slowed. 15 minutes passed, then 20, then 40. Guests began arriving, smiling warmly at me, telling me how beautiful everything looked. A couple friends glanced at the empty chairs but said nothing. They were too kind for that. The florist whispered an apology for blocking one of them with her cart as she rearranged bouquets, but I waved her off. "They'll be here soon," I murmured, though the words felt increasingly flimsy. The wedding coordinator peeked in. "We're ready when you are." Her eyes flicked briefly to the chairs. "Do you want us to wait another few minutes?" I swallowed. "Just a few." We waited 15 more. Still nothing. I stood behind the arbor, clutching my bouquet, the soft rain tapping on the greenhouse glass, like fingertips urging me forward. The music cue began. The guests turned. Evan was already waiting for me at the front, framed by hanging ferns and twinkle lights. My vision blurred. He looked perfect. Gentle, steady mine. But the chairs were still empty. At some point, I realized I was holding my breath, hoping the doors would swing open and my mother would sweep inside with a dramatic apology, my father behind her with that stiff nod he gave when forced to look proud. Nothing. Finally, Evan stepped toward me. "It's time," he whispered. I nodded, though something in me cracked like thin porcelain. I forced myself to walk down the aisle. I forced a smile. I forced the tears not to fall. But during my vows, my eyes flickered toward those chairs again and again, each glance slicing deeper than the last. Afterward, when the reception began, I slipped away for a moment, leaning against the cool glass window. My phone buzzed with an automated FedEx email that had arrived earlier. Delivery confirmed, package signed. The signature was illegible in the tiny preview window, just a loop of black ink, but I assumed it was my father's. I assumed he'd opened the envelope and held my invitation in his hands. I assumed they'd show up. I assumed a lot. I didn't dare open the email fully. I didn't want to see the timestamp. I didn't want proof they'd had the chance to be here and chose not to come. As more guests approached to congratulate us, I tucked the phone away and forced my smile back into place. The night went on. We danced. We cut cake. I laughed when Evan accidentally smeared frosting on my cheek. I made myself memorize the warmth of his hand in mine. But there was a part of me, small, ashamed, stubborn, that kept glancing at the door as if they might still walk through it. They didn't. 3 days after the wedding, I finally opened the FedEx confirmation email. The signature wasn't my father's. It wasn't my mother's either. It was Sierra's. A single looping S that I recognized instantly. I stared at it for a long time, my heartbeat growing louder in my ears. Why would Sierra sign for my wedding invitations? Why would she intercept them? Why wouldn't she tell my parents? My mind raced in frantic circles, digging for explanations that didn't hurt, that didn't point to the obvious. She wouldn't do that. She couldn't. Except, she could. And she had. But back then, I didn't let myself believe it. I made excuses. Maybe she'd signed because she happened to be near the gate. Maybe she set the package on a counter and forgot to mention it. Maybe she'd meant to help. Maybe. Denial is its own kind of self-protection. Weeks passed. My parents never called. Not about the wedding. Not about the photos I sent. Not even when I left a voicemail on Mother's Day telling my mom I loved her and hoped she was doing okay. Silence. A month later, Sierra posted a story on Instagram, a boomerang clip of her sipping iced coffee beside the resort's front gate, laughing with her friends. The date matched the day my invitations were delivered. The caption read, "Spring is for cute drinks and even cuter secrets." My stomach twisted. I watched the clip 10 times before closing the app. Then one afternoon, while I was finalizing a project in my home office, a message from Evan popped up on my screen. "Do you want me to handle this for you?" He'd heard the exhaustion in my voice after I'd left yet another unanswered voicemail for my mother. It wasn't about confrontation. He'd simply seen me hurting, and he wanted to help. I typed back, "No, it's fine. They'll reach out when they're ready." But they didn't reach out. Not for birthdays, not for Thanksgiving, not for Christmas, not for anything. 8 months of silence. 8 months of knowing deep down that they hadn't forgotten my wedding. They'd ignored it. They'd erased it. And I'd kept quiet not because I believed they had an excuse, but because I wasn't ready to face the truth of what their silence meant. Because admitting that truth would mean admitting my family had never been mine in the way I wanted them to be. Back in the present, as the realization settled heavier inside me, a young resort server walked past my chair and whispered, "Ms. Hart. Ms. Miles. Earlier this year, Ms. Sierra asked us to, move a package with your name on it. I thought you should know." He hurried off before I could respond. My breath hitched. Ms. Miles. He'd called me Mrs. Miles. For a moment, the ballroom blurred not from sadness but from clarity. Sharp, piercing clarity. The truth wasn't waiting in some hidden corner. It had been in front of me for 8 months, knocking, asking to be seen. And now, with my sister's voice echoing in my ears and my mother's polished smile still fixed in place, I finally understood what I hadn't let myself accept. They hadn't missed my wedding. They had erased it. And for the first time, I felt the shift inside me. A steady, controlled, undeniable shift. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. The ballroom smelled of wilting roses and burnt-out candles by the time I slipped away from the table and into the wide hallway that led toward the back of the resort. Music still drifted faintly through the open doors, Sierra's curated playlist of wedding ambiance that she'd insisted be played throughout the entire weekend. But out here, away from the cameras and congratulatory noise, the air felt colder, sharper, more honest. My mother's laughter carried down the hall behind me, bright and performative, followed by the hum of relatives trying to pretend nothing awkward had happened at the table. Pretend they hadn't heard me say the words no one expected. My turn already came. Pretend I hadn't dropped a truth they didn't know how to process. Pretend I was still the Julia they could quiet with a look. I pressed my palms against the cool railing of the overlook near the staircase and inhaled slowly. Behind the ballroom doors, I could hear people whispering, not loudly, but enough. Enough for me to catch pieces. Is she serious? Julia must be confused. She always did have a flair for drama. I used to absorb those comments like bruises, each one sinking deeper than the last. But tonight, they rattled harmlessly across my skin, unable to pierce the calm forming at the center of my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one cracking. I was the one watching everyone else start to. Footsteps clicked sharply against marble. Sierra's reflection appeared in the glass before she did her perfect bridal hair. Her glittering neckline. Her eyes narrowed in mild, irritated panic. She didn't bother hiding it when she marched up to me. "What was that?" she hissed. "Why would you say something like that in front of everyone?" I turned slowly. "Because you asked." She laughed, a brittle sound that never reached her eyes. "Don't pull that. You know exactly what you were doing. You can't just drop a bomb like that during my wedding celebration." "Your wedding is over," I replied quietly. "This is just the after party." Sierra's jaw tightened so fast I could hear her teeth click. "Why are you being like this? Are you jealous? Is that it? You had to make tonight about you. I didn't make tonight about me," I said. "You all did." Her nostrils flared. "Julia, be serious. You're not married. Who would you even marry without Mom knowing? Without me knowing, be real." My smile was small, almost polite. "You'd be surprised what I can do when you're not paying attention." For a split second, just one fear flickered behind her eyes. Then she recovered, flipping her hair over one shoulder with the kind of practiced grace that came from years of being told she was perfect. "Nobody believes you," she said. "Not even Mom. Especially not Dad." I shrugged. "That's not my problem." She laughed again, but her voice cracked this time. "Honestly, Julia, you sound unhinged. Just stop before you embarrass yourself." "I'm not the embarrassed one tonight," I said. Sierra froze. A hairline fracture appeared in her expression. Before she could respond, 2 bridesmaids approached calling her name. They froze when they saw me, their faces shifting into the polite pity smile I'd seen all my life. The one that said, "Poor Julia, always the odd one out." Sierra straightened her shoulders, transformed instantly back into the glittering bride. "Excuse me?" she said sweetly to them, then hissed at me under her breath. "Don't ruin this for me." I didn't reply. I simply walked past her back toward the ballroom. Inside, the Hart family was performing again. My mother was perched elegantly at the head of a table, wiping an imaginary smudge from her wineglass, while she laughed with a group of donors from the Brooks family. She looked radiant, every hair in place, posture perfect, the kind of woman who curated her life like a museum exhibit. And like any exhibit, she couldn't stand anything out of place. She noticed me instantly. Her smile faltered. "Julia," she said too brightly. "There you are. Come sit, sweetheart. There you are," and my mother's vocabulary didn't mean "I'm glad you're back." It meant "please stop being noticed." I slid into the empty chair beside her. Her perfume gardenia and something expensive coated the air between us. She leaned in. "What on earth was that about earlier?" "You asked me a question," I said softly. I answered it. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "Julia, be reasonable. You can't say things like that in front of guests. People will think that I'm married." I finished. "That you're unstable," she hissed. My father shifted in his seat. He didn't look at me. He rarely did. But his jaw clenched, and that was enough to tell me he'd heard every word. The Brooks family. Clayton's parents and a couple of investors watched with polite discomfort. My mother noticed them watching and smoothed her hair, adjusting her smile like it was armor. "Julia's always been imaginative," she told them with a little laugh. "She's creative, sensitive. She gets these notions." I stared at my plate. Sensitive, imaginative, notions. Words she used instead of saying a disappointment, a burden, a woman who didn't fit the family image. One of the Brooks women reached across the table. "Your wedding comment earlier, was that a joke?" I looked up. "No." My mother's breath snapped in her throat. "Julia." "Why would I joke about being married?" I asked calmly. Sierra returned in a swirl of silk and perfume. She slid next to Clayton, her hand instantly claiming his arm, her smile sugary and brittle. "Julia's confused," she announced. "She's just stressed." "Really?" Clayton asked, narrowing his eyes at me instead of her. Sierra's fingers tightened on his sleeve. My mother let out a soft, weaponized sigh. "This is not the time, Julia." Aunt Ruth, 2 chairs down, leaned to another relative and whispered something that sounded suspiciously like attention seeker. My father picked up his wineglass and swirled it, avoiding the conversation entirely, but the vein in his temple pulsed. I took a slow breath. Their panic didn't make me angry. It made me clear. In the background, a server carrying a stack of napkins passed behind me and murmured under his breath, "Ms. Sierra told us to highlight the bride only for tonight. She didn't want distractions." My heart stilled, but I didn't show it. I just smiled. Of course she didn't. I rose from my chair, and the conversation dipped again. Everyone glanced up, expecting another falter, another retreat. Instead, I looked at the faces I'd spent my whole life trying to please, and something inside me settled. Not anger, not defiance, just clarity. "You asked me when it was my turn," I said quietly. My mother stiffened. "And I told you." Sierra opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I let the silence stretch again, not out of fear this time, but out of control. My control. What turn Sierra finally forced out? I met her eyes and delivered the truth she had tried so hard to bury. My wedding day wasn't a joke, I said. It wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't an exaggeration. I leaned forward, voice soft but unshakably steady. It was real. It happened. And you all knew it. Sierra paled. My mother's glass slipped slightly in her hand. My father's wine stopped swirling. I straightened, smoothing the front of my dress. And I'm done pretending it didn't. The ballroom noise faded behind me as I stepped out onto the terrace, the night air rolling over my skin like a wake-up call. Everything inside that room felt staged, like my family was performing a glossy version of themselves for an audience they desperately needed to impress. Out here under the dark Washington sky, I could finally breathe without someone watching for cracks. My phone buzzed. A single message glowed across the screen. "Evan, do you need me?" The breath I didn't know I'd been holding slipped out slowly. He always knew. He always sensed the shift in my voice, even through typed words. I typed back with numb fingers. "Not yet. But stay close." I pocketed the phone and gripped the railing, letting the cold metal ground me. The lake below shimmered beneath the strings of lights the resort kept on all night. Another piece of the image Sierra curated for her fairy tale weekend. It looked peaceful. Almost beautiful. But I'd learned the hard way that peace and beauty didn't always mean safety. Not with my family. My thoughts drifted unbidden back to Seattle, back to the life I'd built carefully, quietly, like a sanctuary carved from everything I'd never been allowed to have growing up. Our tiny cottage on Queen Anne Hill. The overgrown ivy I refused to trim because it reminded me of freedom. Mornings with cocoa and sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. Evenings spent leaning over Evan's desk, sketching new garden layouts while he tapped away at lines of encrypted code. That world felt a million miles away from the polished marble floors of Hart Resort. But that world was real. Mine. And I missed it fiercely in this moment. I closed my eyes and pictured Evan standing barefoot in our kitchen. Hair messy, smile soft, the man who spoke quietly, but loved loudly, the opposite of every loud performative gesture my family mistook for love. The opposite of them. I hadn't planned to fall in love with him. Not when we first met 2 years ago during a project presentation for a smart security firm in downtown Seattle. He was a cybersecurity analyst dressed in rolled-up sleeves and clean confidence, asking me questions about the way I layered natural light into my landscape plans. Not mocking, not patronizing, just curious, genuine. "You don't have to impress me," he'd said at the end of that meeting, smiling like he meant every word. Just be. It was the first time in my adult life that anyone had said that to me. Maybe the first time ever. And then slowly, patiently, he stayed. Through late nights, sketching proposals. Through the panic attacks I didn't admit were panic attacks. Through my low expectations of affection, through everything. But there was one part of my life I hadn't let him touch at first. My family. I'd learned from years of history that anyone I brought home would be judged, measured, dismissed if they didn't fit the Hart mold. And Evan didn't fit anything they valued. Not the wealth, not the pedigree, not the role. He was honest, quiet, grounded. And in their world, integrity didn't count as currency. So I'd kept him at a distance from them. I told myself it was to protect him. But deep down I knew it was to protect me. And then one night after dinner in our little kitchen, after laughter that started small and grew into something warm enough to fill the whole house, Evan reached for my hand and said, "Marry me." My first instinct had been fear. My second had been relief. He didn't ask for my family's blessing. He didn't ask for grand gestures. He didn't ask for permission. He just asked for me. So we planned a small ceremony. Simple, intimate, beautiful. Everything I'd never believed I was allowed to have. I had mailed invitations not out of obligation, but out of hope. A quiet, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would show up for me the way they always showed up for Sierra. But they hadn't. And I had swallowed the truth like a stone. I opened my eyes on the terrace, the night air colder against my cheeks now. I could still see those chairs from my wedding empty and waiting. I could still hear Evan's voice whispering at the altar. "If they come, we'll welcome them." If they don't, we'll build our life anyway. I hadn't let myself remember that moment for months. I hadn't let myself feel the pain attached to it. But tonight pulled all the seams apart. And maybe that was why Sierra's cruel little gift didn't sting the way she wanted it to. Maybe that was why my mother's public humiliation didn't make me shrink. Maybe losing their approval finally completely had carved out a new kind of space inside me. A space for truth. My phone buzzed again. A call this time. I answered. Jules Evans' voice was soft but firm. Talk to me. I turned my back to the ballroom doors, leaning against the stone pillar like it could hold me together. They asked when it was my turn, I said quietly. A pause. And what did you say I told them my turn already came? He exhaled slowly. Not surprised. Just steady. And how did they react? How do you think? Like they always do, he said gently. Like it's easier to rewrite your reality than fix their behavior. That pulled a breathy laugh from me, tired but real. You sound like you've rehearsed that line. I have, he admitted. Every time they ignored your calls. Every time you checked your email 10 times a day waiting for a response that never came. Every time you told me, maybe next week, with that little crack in your voice you thought I didn't notice. He noticed everything. I let the silence settle for a moment. The good kind. The kind that didn't fill with judgment or the weight of expectations. Evan, I said softly. I think I'm done. With them, he asked. With hiding. Another pause longer this time. Then, whatever you need, I'm here. I glanced back through the glass doors. My mother was standing near the head table, plastering a smile across her face while she spoke to the Brooks family. Sierra hovered nearby, fussing with her hair, pretending not to eavesdrop. Douglas leaned stiffly against a chair, gripping his wineglass too tightly. They looked like characters in a staged tableau, perfect on the surface, hollow underneath. A family built on image, not love. A family I'd been bending myself into knots for, hoping they'd see worth where they'd only seen obligation. I straightened. Evan. Yes. Stay close to your laptop. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. Always, he said. When I hung up, I stayed outside for a minute longer, watching the lake shimmer and the clouds drift low across the moon. A small gust of wind swept across the terrace, blowing my hair back from my face, like the night itself was clearing something away. 8 months. 8 months of swallowing their silence. 8 months of pretending I wasn't hurt. 8 months of letting them believe they could erase parts of my life they didn't approve of. Not anymore. I stepped back toward the ballroom doors, letting the warmth spill onto my skin. The music swelled. The chatter hummed. The scene inside was exactly as I'd left it, but I wasn't the same woman walking back in. My truth wasn't something to protect anymore. It was something to reveal. And tonight, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what would happen when I did. The dining room shimmered under the soft glow of a crystal chandelier, its light scattering across polished glassware and white linen like an expensive illusion. When I stepped back inside, every head turned toward me, not with affection, but with the kind of anticipatory silence people reserve for car crashes and scandals. The staff moved quietly around the long table, laying down the next course with careful, trained hands, as though aware they were tiptoeing over a fault line. My mother gestured stiffly to the empty chair beside her. "Sit, darling," she said, with a smile stretched too tight. We were just about to start. I sat, calmly, deliberately. The quiet felt like pressure against my skin, but not in the suffocating way it once had. This time it was the room that seemed uncomfortable. Sierra cleared her throat, all sweetness and showmanship. "Before we continue, I have something for Julia. A little gift." Her voice rose theatrically at the end, like she was unveiling a prize on a game show. A server stepped forward with a pastel pink box tied with a satin ribbon. He placed it directly in front of me. My mother clasped her hands, eyes gleaming with staged excitement. "Oh, wonderful, Sierra. Go on, Julia. Open it." I didn't touch the box. Not yet. I studied Sierra's expression, her too bright smile, the nervous flutter of her lashes, the triumph she tried to conceal. In that moment, she reminded me of a cat pawing at a mouse hole, waiting for the twitch of movement that signaled victory. "Don't be shy," she said. "It's meant to help. Help." I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside lay the 1-year VIP membership card to an app called Last Hope Love, advertised for women over 30, seeking one last chance at companionship. Underneath was a glossy book, the gold lettering practically mocking me under the chandelier's light. Why Some Women Die Alone. A soft chorus of awkward laughter ran down the table. Someone gasped. Someone whispered. Every reaction felt rehearsed like a script they all knew by heart. My mother leaned toward me, voice dripping with false sympathy. "Sweetheart, don't take it the wrong way. We just want you to find happiness." I closed the box, gently set it aside, and said, "Thank you, Sierra." Her face twitched as though she'd been prepared for tears, maybe a dramatic exit. But not that. "You're welcome," she said uncertainly. Across the table, Clayton's jaw tightened. He didn't smile. He didn't join in the laughter. He just stared at Sierra like he was seeing her from a new angle. I settled my napkin in my lap and let the silence stretch thick as syrup. It was the kind of silence people couldn't tell was calm or dangerous, and Sierra hated not being able to read me. My mother cleared her throat for control. "Let's refocus, shall we?" she said lightly, raising her water glass. "This year is all about family milestones. Our Sierra, our beautiful bride, has done things properly with grace and timing, and, with a $50,000 wedding, added one of the Brooks guests, with a laugh meant to flatter." My mother glowed. She lived for that glow. Sierra preened beside Clayton, slipping her hand through his arm, her engagement ring glittering proudly. "We're very grateful," she said, gazing at my parents like she owed them her entire happiness. My father nodded, swirling his wine. "We've always felt it's our responsibility to guide our daughters toward success." I lifted my glass to my lips, though I didn't drink. "You mean Sierra?" The remark didn't raise my voice, just raised the temperature of the whole table. My mother stiffened. "Julia." "I didn't say anything untrue," I murmured. The Brooks family exchanged glances, sensing the fracture. My mother leaned closer, smile brittle. "Let's not make this about you, darling." "It wasn't about me," I replied. "Not until you made it so." The table fell into another uneasy hush. From behind me, a server bent to refill my water and whispered so softly I nearly thought I imagined it earlier this year. "Ms. Sierra told us to redirect a package with your name on it. Just thought you should know." He hurried on before I could look at him. The breath caught in my chest, but my face didn't change. If anything, the information steadied me. Because confirmation, even whispered in passing, is more powerful than hope. I turned back to the table and found Sierra staring at me. Hard. What she snapped. Nothing I said lifting my glass again. My mother, missing the tension entirely, clapped her hands to recenter the attention on herself. "All right now, Julia dear, why don't you tell everyone what you meant earlier, about your turn already happening?" My father put down his fork, glaring. "Yes, you owe us an explanation." I rested my hands on the tablecloth. "I don't owe anyone anything." "Julia," my mother warned. "Stop being dramatic." Clayton's eyes flicked from Sierra to me, thoughtful. "Actually," I said quietly, "I answered your question the first time." And that answer, Sierra interrupted sharply, was ridiculous. "You are not married." A faint murmur of agreement rippled through the table. I looked at her calmly. "Who said you'd know?" She blinked rapidly. "Because I would. I always know. You never do anything without—" She stopped. Too late. I tilted my head. "Without what?" "Without telling you. Without getting your approval. without letting you control the narrative." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Clayton leaned slightly away from her. My father slammed his palm lightly against the table. "Enough. This family has a reputation to uphold. If you want to play these games—" "It's not a game," I said. My mother tried again. "Julia, stop. Just apologize to your sister for disrupting her night. You embarrassed everyone." A strange laugh bubbled up from me, not loud, not hysterical, just real. "You think I embarrassed everyone?" My mother's voice tightened. "You certainly tried." "No." I met her eyes unblinking. "You embarrassed yourselves. 8 months ago." The words settled over the table like falling ash. Sierra pushed back her chair, standing abruptly. "Stop saying that," she demanded. "You're lying." "Am I?" I asked softly. "You are," she said, though her voice wavered. "If you were married, there would have been a wedding. People would have known. Mom would have known. Dad would have known. I would have known." I leaned back, letting her fill the silence. "You all would have come," I finished for her. "Right?" My mother swallowed hard. "Of course," she said, but the conviction wasn't there. "I invited you," I said. The room went still. Even the staff froze mid-step. My father's face flushed. "That never happened." "It did," I replied quietly but surely. Julia Sierra said hissed, pleaded stop. But it was too late. Clayton stared at her like her silence was more telling than any confession. My mother's hand trembled around her glass. My father's jaw locked. And I smiled, small but certain. "You asked me," I said softly when it was my turn. My fingers brushed the napkin, smoothing it flat. It already was. The dining room felt warmer than before, almost too warm, as if the air itself was reacting to what I'd just said. Heads tilted toward me from every direction, curiosity sharpening into something else. Caution, suspicion, fear. The servers slowed their movements, waiting for a signal to flee or freeze. Even the fireplace at the far end crackled louder, like the room was holding its breath. Sierra was the first to move. She pushed back her chair, the legs scraping sharply against the polished floor. "What is this supposed to mean?" she demanded, voice quivering just enough to betray the panic behind it. "Are you seriously still doing this?" I didn't answer right away. I let her words hang there, suspended between us. It made her shift uncomfortably, eyes darting to the Brooks family, then to Clayton, then back to me again, searching for somewhere to land her outrage. Clayton leaned forward, elbows on the table, looking at Sierra rather than me. "What happened 8 months ago?" he asked slowly. "Do you know?" Sierra stiffened. "Why would I know what she's imagining?" I caught the telltale tremor in her jaw. She was losing her composure, something she never let happen in public. Across the table, my mother gave a nervous laugh. "Oh, good grief, this is ridiculous. Julia is just tired. She tends to overthink things." I didn't look at her. My eyes stayed on Sierra. "I'm not overthinking anything." My father slammed his fork down. "Julia, enough." But his anger slid past me like water. It didn't land. When someone has been yelling at you your entire life, the volume stops mattering. From behind, a soft voice murmured near my shoulder. "The same young server from earlier. Mrs. Miles," he corrected himself quietly. "That package, I really did see your sister tell us to relocate it." He stepped away quickly, but the damage was done. Sierra whipped toward him, eyes wide. "What did you just say?" He bowed his head, muttering an apology, and practically jogged toward the kitchen. Clayton's gaze sharpened. "What package?" Sierra's smile, her flawless, camera-ready smile, fractured. He misunderstood. "I never—" "You signed for something from Julia," Clayton said, his tone slicing through her lies. "Didn't you?" Sierra opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "I sign for everything at the resort. It's literally constant, hundreds of deliveries." "Not from me," I cut in. "Not that week." My mother placed a hand over her chest, the picture of offended dignity. Julia, this is not the time to dredge up old grievances. Sierra is a bride. We are with business partners. Do not create drama. Drama, I repeated softly. You erased my wedding. A ripple of shock passed through the table. One of the Brooks women leaned closer. You had a wedding, and they didn't go. Of course we didn't. My father snapped too quickly. There was no wedding. His vehemence was like a spotlight on the truth, too bright, too obvious. Are you sure you want to say that? I asked, meeting his eyes. His jaw flexed. There was no invitation. Clayton looked between us, gaze narrowing. Julia sent invitations. That's what she just said. My mother let out a dismissive scoff. Please. If she had sent something that important, I would have seen it. I tilted my head. Would you? The room went too quiet. An unnatural kind of quiet that felt like the moment before a fire alarm goes off. My mother's fingers curled around her wineglass. She didn't answer. It never came, she insisted weakly. Because Sierra signed for it and hid it, I said. Sierra lurched forward. That's a lie. I looked at her evenly. Are you sure you want that to be your story? Her lips parted, then closed again. Aunt Ruth, sitting near the end of the table, spoke up unexpectedly. I did see a FedEx truck near the Hart entrance that week, she said, thoughtfully. Odd time for a delivery. And Sierra was the only one staying here. Sierra's face drained of color. My father glared at his sister. Ruth, stay out of it. But Ruth shook her head. No, Julia deserves to be heard. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Clayton leaned in, voice careful but firm. Sierra, did you sign for something from Julia? Sierra inhaled sharply, preparing to deny it, but her voice cracked. The crack was everything. I don't remember, she stammered. There are so many packages, so many deliveries, I can't keep track of all of them. But he said you told them to reroute it, I pointed out. That's not, Sierra's voice climbed frantic now. That's not the same, I didn't know what it was. You didn't open it, I said. You didn't look inside. You just threw it away. How dare you accuse me? She was shaking now, mascara smudging slightly at the corners. Because that's what the security footage shows. The table erupted in gasps. Clayton stared at me. Footage. My father's voice boomed across the table. Julia, that's enough of your imagination. No, I said. It's not my imagination, and you know it. I saw it then. The flicker. A guilty, terrified flicker in my father's eyes. My mother's hand clenching her napkin. Sierra's frozen expression, lips parted, eyes wide. Clayton sat back, slowly watching Sierra crumble. You deleted her wedding? He whispered, horrified. On purpose. No! Sierra lunged for him, grabbing his arm. You don't understand. I was trying to protect who? He snapped, jerking his arm away. Your image, your spotlight, your place at the top of this facade. My mother stood shaking. This is a private family matter. Clayton, sit down. Clayton didn't sit. Instead, he asked quietly, If you had nothing to hide, why are you all panicking? No one answered. I felt every gaze swing toward me as I placed my napkin on the table and stood. You want the truth? I asked, my voice steady. My father glowered. Julia, don't you dare. I'm done being quiet, I said. You erased my wedding. You hid my life, and now you're terrified I won't let you rewrite the story. My mother's face went ghost pale. Sierra trembled. Clayton looked at me like puzzle pieces were snapping together in his mind. I took a slow breath. And then I said the words that cracked the room wide open. I have proof. A chair scraped. A fork fell. Somewhere across the room, a server dropped a spoon that clattered loudly against the tile. Sierra swallowed hard, mascara trembling. My mother whispered, Julia, please, don't. My father hissed, You will not embarrass us in front of the Brooks family. But it was too late. Because I already had. And I wasn't finished. Not even close. I picked up my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. Evan's message glowed back at me. "I'm ready when you are." I lifted my eyes to my family and said the last line of the night with perfect clarity. "Evan," I whispered into the phone, "get ready." Then I looked at the table at the people who had underestimated me my entire life. "The truth," I said softly, "is coming." The moment my thumb brushed the edge of my phone, the entire dining room seemed to contract. Conversations died, silverware stilled. Even the chandelier felt like it dimmed its light, tightening into a single trembling pulse above our heads. Every eye fixed on me, on the phone in my hand, on the calm they couldn't decipher. Sierra swallowed hard. "Julia," she whispered, almost pleading. "Don't do this." Her fear was new. I almost didn't recognize it on her. I slid my phone to the side of my plate, untouched. "You all wanted the truth," I said softly. "I'm giving it to you." My father leaned forward, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. Not another word. His voice dripped with humiliation, fear disguised as authority. "You've said enough." "Actually," I murmured, "I've barely started." A few Brooks guests exchanged looks, confused, intrigued, uncomfortable. Clayton sat rigidly beside Sierra, shoulders, squared eyes locked on me like he was bracing for impact. My mother dabbed her napkin against her lips in tiny, controlled movements. "Julia, dear, you're upset. That's all. I'm not upset," I cut in. "I'm finished." The sentence dropped like ice into boiling water. Sierra pushed her chair back frantically. "Julia, please, whatever you think happened 8 months ago, I don't think I said. I know." Her breath hitched. For the first time in my life, I watched my sister truly panic. Not perform it, not fake it for attention, but drown in it. Clayton turned to her slowly. 8 months ago. What happened? 8 months ago, Sierra. Sierra blinked rapidly, mascara trembling. Nothing happened. She's making this up to ruin tonight. That's the second time you've accused me of ruining something, I said calmly. Funny how that word keeps circling back to you. My mother stiffened. "Julia." I ignored her. Across the table, Aunt Ruth leaned in, whispering loudly to her husband. I knew something was wrong. I knew it. The pressure built hot and sharp. I folded my hands on the table. "I am married." A gasp rippled through the room, small, disbelieving, but growing. "And you all knew it." I continued, watching the color drain from my mother's face. "Because I invited you. Each of you." My father slammed his fist down, rattling the stemware. "That is a lie." "Is it?" My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Sierra's shoulders pulled tight like a startled animal ready to bolt. Clayton stared at her, slow horror dawning. "You told me she fabricated everything. You said she was just trying to get attention." Sierra shook her head, frantic. "That's Clayton, please. That's not what happened." My mother gripped the tablecloth. "Julia, stop this right now. You're humiliating your sister." "No," I said. "She did that herself." Clayton's jaw tightened. What invitation? Sierra's head snapped toward him. "There weren't any, Clayton. I swear I don't know what she's talking ab." "She signed for them," I said. Silence swallowed the room. Clayton turned back to Sierra, painfully slow. "Sierra." She didn't answer. You could feel the moment the Brooks family shifted their posture, their eyes, their entire perception tilting. My father found his voice first. "What nonsense? Do you truly want to accuse me of nonsense?" I asked quietly, with the Brooks family sitting right beside you. My mother flinched visibly. Clayton's gaze sharpened. Julia wouldn't invent something like this, not something this serious. Sierra's lips parted, but no sound came out. "You looked me in the eyes," Clayton said, voice tightening, "and told me she was lying because you knew the truth." Sierra blinked rapidly. Clayton, please." My father cut in sharply. "Julia, You're twisting things as usual. You always make yourself the victim. Your sister has real responsibilities. Real importance. Real importance, I echoed. Right. Is that why she intercepted my delivery? Because my wedding threatened her spotlight. My mother gasped. Julia, the room shifted, everyone leaning forward now, watching Sierra like a wounded animal caught in headlights. Clayton's voice was low, steady, dangerous. Answer her. Sierra's breath stuttered. I didn't know there were so many packages. How was I supposed to? So you do remember signing something I asked? The trap closed, soft and lethal. Sierra realized it too late. Clayton exhaled slowly, eyes darkening. You lied to me. No, Clayton, it's not like that. He held up a hand. Then tell the truth. My mother jumped in. Sierra was overwhelmed, she didn't understand. Funny, I said she understood enough to throw something away. A ripple of shock whispered through the room. Sierra snapped, I never threw anything away. But you did reroute it, I murmured. At least according to your own staff. That was it. That was the fracture line. Sierra stood abruptly, her chair slamming back into the buffet behind her. Stop! Just stop, Julia. Her voice cracked open, high and shrill, raw with fear. You're ruining everything. I lifted my gaze to hers. No, Sierra, I said. I'm finally telling everything. Clayton stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him. The Brooks family straightened, assessing the scene with sharp, calculating eyes. My mother whispered something frantic to my father, mostly about reputation, appearances, consequences. My father's face darkened into something ugly. If you say one more word, he growled, I will. You'll what? I asked softly. It made him freeze. The truth is coming whether you like it or not. I continued. You can either face it, or you can keep pretending. But I'm done helping you pretend. And then slowly, deliberately, I reached for my phone. A cold hush swept through the room. Sierra's hands trembled. Julia! No? I pressed the side button. The screen lit up. A message from Evan waited at the top. Ready when you are. I looked straight at Sierra, then at my mother, then at my father, all of them paling, all of them bracing against the inevitable. And I whispered into the phone, now. The moment the word left my lips, the chandelier lights flickered once, just once, but enough for every single person in that room to feel the shift. Then I set the phone down, rose from my chair, and looked at the family that had spent 30 years rewriting my life to suit their scripts. Don't look at me, I said softly. Look at the screen. The chandelier lights flickered again once, twice, and then the massive smart TV mounted above the sideboard went black. Conversations died mid-breath. Forks hovered, glasses froze halfway to lips. It felt like the room itself inhaled sharply and forgot how to exhale. My mother clutched the back of her chair. What is happening with the screen? My father glared toward the staff. Who touched something? This is unacceptable. No one touched anything, I said quietly. A tiny line of white text appeared in the top corner of the screen, small but unmistakable. Remote access active. A soft gasp rippled through the room. Sierra stumbled back a step. Julia, she whispered, voice shaking. What did you do? I didn't look at her. I kept my gaze on the TV as the black screen pulsed once, then shifted to a digital desktop blue background, neat rows of folders and one shimmering icon in the center. Project Revelation. Clayton's brow furrowed. What? Is that? My father's voice cracked like a whip across the table. Turn it off, now. I can't, I said calmly. I'm not controlling it. My mother turned to me, eyes wide. What is this, Julia? I met her gaze. It's the truth. The cursor on the screen moved smooth, decisive, controlled from someplace far away. From Seattle. From Evan. The room fell so silent I could hear the faint hum of the heating vents. The cursor clicked the first folder. Delivery records, a PDF opened, filling the screen. Bright FedEx orange. Clear tracking number. Timestamp 8:16 a.m. 8 months earlier. Destination Heart Lake Resort. Recipient signature, a looping unmistakable S. Sierra's signature. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father shook his head rapidly. This is fake. This is fabricated. Julia, how dare you? It's directly from FedEx's server, I said. Fully authenticated. Clayton leaned in, eyes narrowing at the signature. Sierra, that's your name. Sierra's throat moved in a hard swallow. I sign for everything. Not for me, I said. Sierra stepped backward until she hit the wall. The cursor moved again, this time to another folder. Email routing. My mother whispered, Julia, please don't. The screen filled with an open Gmail settings page, my mother's inbox pristine, color-coded, over-organized, in that way she loved. But the focus wasn't the inbox, it was the filters tab. At the top was a filter marked with a red flag icon. Rule if subject contains Julia wedding or heart. Delete permanently. Skip inbox. Creation date 48 hours after the FedEx delivery. Device used Sierra's iPhone. Clayton jerked his head toward Sierra so fast she flinched. You hacked your mother's email. I didn't hack anything, she snapped, voice cracking. She let me handle her correspondence. To delete emails about your sister's wedding? Clayton demanded. That's not I didn't. It wasn't. Sierra's words tangled into one another, collapsing under their own weight. My mother turned to her helplessly. You told me you were just organizing things. I was. Sierra cried, tears forming now. I did it to help. I did it because what I asked quietly. Because my wedding embarrassed you. The cursor hovered over another folder. CCTV front gate. The room collectively stiffened. Sierra whispered, Don't. But the cursor clicked. The video loaded instantly, professional quality, crystal clear. The front gate camera of the resort. The date and timestamp burned into the corner. The FedEx truck pulled up. The driver stepped out with a blue package. He rang the bell. He handed the box to Sierra. She smiled politely, signed, then looked down at the sender address from Julia and Evan Miles. Her smile dropped. Her face hardened. She glanced around. Then she marched straight to the recycle bins near the side entrance, lifted the lid, and hurled the entire box inside without opening it. A gasp shot across the table so loudly it echoed. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor. Clayton's voice was a whisper of disbelief. You threw it away. Sierra's mascara streaked down her cheek. I didn't mean I was stressed. I wasn't thinking You looked pretty deliberate, I said softly. Sierra shook her head violently. No, Clayton. You have to understand. I was trying to protect my parents, their reputation, our wedding, everything. Clayton rose slowly from his chair as though the ground itself had shifted beneath him. Protect them from what? Your sister getting married. You erased her wedding because you couldn't stand sharing 1 ounce of attention. Clayton, please. Sierra scrambled toward him. He stepped away from her. My mother's face went gray. Sierra, I trusted you. My father grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles white. Julia, he barked. You have no right to invade our systems. I had full right, I said. I designed them. I installed them. And I warned you 2 years ago that failing to change your admin password was a security risk. My father looked like he wanted to throw something. You planned this. You plotted this entire spectacle. No, I said. You did. The cursor moved again, closing the video. Then a final image appeared, a digital copy of my wedding invitation, the one Sierra threw away with the date, time, and venue printed in elegant script. A photo Evan had taken of one of the invitations before we mailed them. Clayton stared at it, then at Sierra. You knew. You knew she was telling the truth. And you lied to me. Sierra collapsed into her chair, sobbing. My mother looked at me with hollow eyes. Julia, please. This doesn't have to go further. It already did, I said. My father tried to regain ground. We can fix this. We can clean this up. You can't clean up the truth, I said. Mr. Brooks rose from his chair. When he spoke, the room trembled more than the TV screen had. I am ending our partnership, he said to my father. Effective immediately. My father's face drained of color. You can't. I just did, Mr. Brooks said. Clayton exhaled slowly and removed the engagement ring from Sierra's finger before placing it on the table with a soft, devastating click. We're done, he said. Sierra let out a broken sob. Clayton, no, please. He walked away. My mother sank into her chair, shaking. My father stared at the ring as if it detonated their entire dynasty. And I simply stood there, steady, calm, finally free. The TV screen went dark again. The truth had been spoken, and the room would never be the same. I lifted my chin, looking around at the wreckage of my family's performance. Now I said quietly, "You finally see me." The silence after the screen went dark felt heavier than the truth itself. No one moved. No one breathed. The chandelier hummed softly above us, its light glinting off broken glass and untouched plates. Sierra's sobs were the only sound in the room, ragged, uneven, the sound of a life collapsing in real time. I remained standing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trembling. Sierra pressed both hands to her face, shaking. "You don't understand," she choked out. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Clayton turned toward her with a slow, almost mechanical motion. "You threw away your sister's wedding invitations," he said. "How far did you think it was going to go?" Her fingers slipped down her cheeks, streaked with mascara. "I was trying to protect us, protect the family, protect our image." "There is nothing left to protect," Clayton said, stepping back as if he were afraid she might reach for him again. "Not after that." Sierra lunged toward him. He moved aside. She stumbled, catching herself on the back of a chair. My mother stood abruptly, her voice frantic. "Clayton, wait! You're upset! You're overwhelmed! Let's all calm down." "No," he said, not raising his voice but sharpening it. "I'm not overwhelmed. I'm horrified." The entire Brooks family stood in a unified motion, their faces stiff with disapproval. Behind them, other guests exchanged looks that ranged from shocked to disgusted. My father's face twitched like a fault line. "Please," he said to Mr. Brooks, "we can discuss this privately." "This doesn't need to become a public spectacle," Mr. Brooks finished coldly. "It already did. And we watched your daughter destroy her sister's wedding without remorse." My father flinched. Douglas Mrs. Brooks added, "I cannot imagine running a business with a family capable of that." My mother grabbed my father's arm. "Say something," she whispered, but her voice cracked. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Mr. Brooks gave a curt nod. "We're leaving." Clayton was the last to move. He turned to Sierra and gently removed the engagement ring she kept trying to hide behind her fingers. He held it for a moment, not with sentiment, but with the kind of finality people use when closing a door forever. Then he placed the ring on the table with a muted click that echoed louder than any shout. Sierra let out a broken, guttural cry. "We're done," he said. He didn't even look at her again. He walked out. The Brooks family followed. Silence rushed in behind them, deafening and absolute. My mother sank into her chair. My father stared at the doorway, breathing through his teeth, face mottled with fury and humiliation. I stayed exactly where I was. Sierra finally lifted her head, eyes red and wild. "This is your fault!" she screamed at me. "You ruined everything! You just couldn't let me have one perfect night." I blinked once. "You had 8 perfect months." Her lips trembled. "You'll regret this," she whispered, voice thick with rage. "I'll tell everyone that you faked all of it, that you staged everything to get attention." "No, Sierra," I said calmly. "You won't. Try me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice until only she and my stunned parents could hear. "You committed federal mail tampering." Sierra froze. Her breath caught mid-sob. "You intercepted a package addressed to someone else. You discarded it, and then you lied about it for 8 months. Her eyes darted around, frantic. You wouldn't go to the police if you lie about me publicly. I said I absolutely will." My father shot up from his chair. "How dare you threaten your sister?" "I'm not threatening her," I said evenly. "I'm giving her boundaries." My mother looked between us, face drained of color. "Julia, we can fix this. We can." "This isn't something I broke," I said. "It was broken long before tonight." Sierra collapsed back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. My mother hovered over her, fussing uselessly. My father stood frozen still, trying to calculate how to salvage whatever sliver of reputation he had left. "Julia," my mother whispered shakily, "you can't just walk away after what you've done." I laughed softly. "What I've done?" I gestured to the wreckage around us, the broken engagement ring, the overturned chairs, the silent crowd still processing the truth. "This," I said, "is what you did." I reached for my coat draped over the back of my chair. My father tried one last time. "If you leave now, you'll regret it." I slipped my arms into my sleeves. "No," I said, fastening the last button. "I regret every time I stayed." They said nothing. I turned toward the exit, feeling the weight of every year I'd spent contorting myself to fit their expectations, and feeling that weight finally mercifully fall away. Halfway up the stairs, a tremulous voice called out, "Julia, wait!" I stopped, but didn't turn. My mother's voice trembled. "Your family. We can repair this. We can hide this. We can—" I turned just enough to meet her eyes. "You don't get to hide me anymore." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I walked toward the front doors, each step slicing cleanly into the last remnants of whatever tie remained between us. The lobby lights gleamed off the marble floors, reflecting a version of me I nearly didn't recognize. Steady. Whole. Done. When I stepped outside, the night air hit my face, cold, sharp, liberating. The resort loomed behind me, glowing like a perfect facade covering a rotting foundation. The valet hurried to bring my car around, but I shook my head. I pulled out my phone instead. Evan answered on the first ring. "Jules." "It's over," I said, voice steady. A breath of relief moved through the receiver. "Good. Come home. Home." A word that had never pointed in their direction. I walked toward the end of the driveway, away from the lights, away from the lies, away from the people who had never once tried to understand me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The resort lights were still visible in the rearview mirror when the taxi turned onto the main road, but I refused to look back. I leaned my forehead against the cool window and watched the dark evergreens blur into streaks as we headed toward town. Each passing tree felt like another layer of noise being stripped from my body. Another expectation, another lie, another weight. By the time we reached the highway, I could breathe again. My phone buzzed beside me. Evan's name lit up the screen. I answered immediately. "Jules." His voice was soft, steady, the exact opposite of everything I'd just walked away from. "It's done," I said. He exhaled a quiet, relieved sound that settled something deep inside me. "Good." I was starting to worry. "You always do. You always scare me," he murmured. "But I'm here. Just get home. Home." That single word felt like a warm hand on the back of my neck. I closed my eyes and let it settle in my chest as the taxi carried me farther from the resort's marble facade and closer to the life I had chosen for myself. When I walked into our little cottage an hour later, the porch light glowed just like he promised. Evan opened the door before I could even reach the handle, pulling me into his arms, without saying a word. The scent of cedar and laundry soap wrapped around me, grounding me in a way nothing else could. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't unravel. I just breathed. "It's finally over," I whispered into his shirt. Evan's arms tightened around me. "No," he corrected gently. "It finally begins." We spent that night curled up on the couch, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing slow, soothing patterns on my arm. He didn't ask for details. He didn't demand explanations. He didn't fill the silence with empty comfort.